Hi everybody, and welcome to another AIIA webinar. By my count, we're over 30 now. And it's great to have with us Remco Breuker from Leiden University. Hi Remco, it's good to see you.
Hi Bryce, very good to be here.
Well, North Korea has been ratcheting up tensions of late. About 5 or 6 hours ago, the New York Times was reporting that it was going to launch 3,000 balloons carrying 12 million propaganda pamphlets, as well as cigarette butts and other trash to drop on South Korea. You might be asking yourself, how is the North paying for all of this? You might also be asking yourself, how the North is paying for the lavish lifestyle of its leaders and those who surround them. Well, to answer these questions, of course, we do have Remco, who was the star of the show a few weeks back on a documentary that appeared on Australian television on ABC Four Corners, Bureau 39. He was the advisor, the lead researcher, the lead consultant, and the lead interviewee in that documentary. And his interests are broad. He is an expert on medieval Korean as well as modern North Korean politics. He has recently led a number of research projects, I believe, on North Korean slavery in other countries, including the European Union, and he was a director of the LeidenAsiaCentre. So we're very well placed to be discussing the topic of North Korean overseas financial activities. Remco.
Thank you. Thank you for the too kind and too generous introduction. It's great to be in Canberra, even if only through the internet. I'm looking forward to the day to actually be there again. I have prepared a 25-minute talk on Bureau 39 on North Korean economic overseas activities. What I'd like to focus on, however, is not so much the things that we talked about in the documentary, but the domestic organization behind Bureau 39. Which is, to my knowledge, not something that has been done extensively before, simply because we didn't have the data, and we do have those data now. Before I start with that, let me run you through a few of the more, I guess, well-known North Korean examples of entrepreneurship, economic initiative, and basically the activities that make it possible for North Korea to continue to exist and to continue to fund its, the lavish lifestyle of its leaders, and certainly also the printing of, well, as far as I understand, color leaflets, which is something that North Korea doesn't do very often anymore these days. What I'd like to do is also to try and demystify Bureau 39 a little bit, and to get away from the notion of North Korea as a hermit kingdom. Okay, well, what I'd like to do then is to demystify Bureau 39. It gets a lot of coverage, but it's basically, at the same time, it's not very well understood. It's never been sanctioned, for example, not by the UN, which is strange if you see that just about anybody and everything from North Korea has been sanctioned, and its most important office, its most important institute, that makes probably most of its money overseas, has never been sanctioned. That's what I'd like to explain, how this is possible, and to understand, or to come to at least the beginning of understanding where the money is coming from and where the products are going, to show you that North Korea is not a real hermit kingdom, but as one of my colleagues put it, a most enterprising country. You may be familiar with North Korean trading, and usually what we see is things like this, the trade fair in North Korea. The video doesn't seem to work. Well, I'll skip it then. But people or business people traveling to North Korea and ordering their products there. I'm not seeing anything anymore. I hope you can still see me. Well, if I'm not visible anymore, let me know, Bryce.
Yes. We can see you, Remco. Keep going.
Okay, good. That's just my computer or North Korean hackers interfering, perhaps. What I would like to show you is a different North Korea, not just the North Korea that we see in the media, and take you through very briefly its most profitable enterprises overseas, which this is not an exhaustive list. Overseas laborers, weapons, statues, clothes, drugs, counterfeit money and cigarettes, and just about anything else you can think of. And I do mean that quite literally, really anything you can think of. A Dutch documentary at the end of this year, December documentary, and they wanted to make a documentary in style and in the atmosphere of the season, December, so they decided they would go after the production of fake beards, Santa Claus and beards. And as it turns out, they are being sold from China, but manufactured in North Korea. So anything from an AK-47 factory to fake Santa Claus beards being produced in North Korea. I think we severely underestimate how much is produced, although at the moment, obviously, due to COVID-19, this probably has taken a huge hit. But generally speaking, North Korea is much more active in producing things that are parts of our daily lives, I think, than we generally know. So the question is very simple. What's going on? Two things that you need to know before I continue. And fact number one, in that sense, is that North Korea is a capitalist country. I know it looks socialist. I know it looks like it still retained the kind of iconography that we associate with the former Soviet Union, with former Eastern Europe. It hasn't been a socialist country for a long time. Fact number two, I think this is a fact we are very much familiar with. North Korea needs money, like any country would. It is a country for which the international trade is much more important than we think it is. And there's all kinds of reasons why it would need money. There is, of course, there are the weapon development programs. There is the leftist lifestyle of its leaders, but there's also just the very straightforward fact that in these days it is all but impossible to survive on your own, even if that, like in North Korea, your official ideology says you should be self-sufficient. No country is. North Korea needs its international trade as much or even perhaps even more than many other countries in the world. And if we put those two facts together, this is what we get. Overseas workers. Our project team has looked into this for the last 5 years or so. The dispatch of North Korean workers overseas, also to the European Union. I will not go into too many details here, but at its height, over the last few years, there were probably between 150,000 to 200,000 workers abroad. In China, about 100,000, Russia, 50,000 or so, the European, a few thousand, which is a lot less, but the money that was made per person was much higher, so it was actually a quite profitable enterprise. The Middle East, Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, you could find North Korean laborers just about anywhere. There is a debate whether this is a good thing or not. In itself, if North Koreans want to work outside of the country, and I know work in the Netherlands, for example, which they don't, but they worked in Germany and in Poland, fine. The thing is, what happened really resembles modern slavery in the sense that they don't get to keep their earnings, they don't have freedom, they're not allowed to watch the internet, read newspapers. Of course they do, humans being humans, but there is a strong argument to be made there that this is not exactly the most pleasant circumstance to be in, even if many North Koreans want to go abroad because there's more money to be made there, which is true, but most of the money goes to the state. We'll get back to this later in my presentation. The arms trade is another way for North Korea to make money. And this is a source of income that has taken hit after hit the last 2 decades. it has been sanctioned not out of existence, but it has contracted to a large extent. Although still, Syria, for example, has relied on North Korean weapons for Assad to win its civil war, for example. Without North Korean arms, who knows what would have happened in Syria. But there's more. There's the more, I guess, sensationalist enterprises like the export of drugs, crystal meth, being probably its most famous drug that's being exported outside of the country. North Korean crystal meth is supposed to be the purest crystal meth that is out there on the market. Basically because it's no longer produced by the state, but the state still allows this to happen, which means that the drugs are produced in proper laboratories where properly trained chemists work. So this is not like a Breaking Bad scenario, like in the Netherlands, where also crystal meth is produced, but it's somewhere in the country in trailer parks or in trailers. In North Korea, it's produced in state-run or university even laboratories. Another source of revenue is the building of statues and monuments outside of the country. And this is, in a way, should not come as a surprise. One of the few countries in the world, I think, that has retained the ability and the capacities to build large-scale monuments, because they still do it themselves often, is North Korea. So many of the African monuments, like this one in Botswana, this Ethiopian monument, or this monument in Zimbabwe, have been built by North Korean laborers, designed by North Koreans also. And this is maybe the most important and certainly the biggest statue built outside of North Korea, the African Renaissance Monument in Senegal, which I haven't been able to see it for myself, but I'm told it needed to be redone, because in the first version, the man and the woman you can see look suspiciously much like North Koreans instead of Senegalese. Anyway, it's not just statues like this, but also museums like this Panorama Museum, for example, in Cambodia, near Angkor Wat, the most visited place in the world in terms of tourists. So it's a very logical place to put a museum, built by DRPK laborers. And the Panorama, which is just a huge painting, was painted by approximately 160 North Korean painters who went there to paint a 13th or 12th century battle between the Cambodian Khmer and the Thai. And it's still being managed with North Korea, although the director is a Cambodian. There's much more, but I'd like to just briefly mention it. There's the counterfeit money, counterfeit cigarettes. There's the software you can actually order in North Korea. The other side of the coin there is, of course, the cybercrime North Korea has also become famous for. There's the clothing. I would not be surprised that if you would check your own clothes to the extent that you can, that much of it that says that that has a made in China label was actually made in North Korea or made by North Koreans in China. The last research project we finished was on the outsourcing of clothing production, textile production to North Korea by Chinese companies that took orders from Dutch and European and American companies. And some of the really big companies, the really big textile brands did this. They told us that they did not know that their clothes were being made in North Korea. We haven't been able to establish whether that's true or not. What we did manage to establish is that the Chinese companies, they deal with outsourced up to 90% of their clothing production to North Korea. And this is just to give you an overview of how much North Korea has been active overseas. What basically means, I think, what we're seeing and what it means is that North Korea has been part of the global economy for quite a while. And it still is, and it will be after the corona restrictions will be lifted and the global economy takes off again. Now, this presentation was supposed to be about Bureau 39. I don't think I've mentioned the Institute yet, or not really. Now, what does Bureau 39 has to do with this? Two things. Bureau 39 has been rumored to take a cut of all the economic activities outside of North Korea. It was established in the early 70s as a bureau, originally probably housed in room number 39, which is why it's called Bureau 39 or Office 39 or even Room 39. And it's tasked with earning money for the maintenance of the leadership, which you should take in a very broad sense. This is not just about the lavish leadership, lavish living style of the leadership. This is also about their economic viability, their capacity to give money, funds, and other things to the elite, to their supporters. So in a very real sense, it's one of the main supports behind the North Korean leadership. Not just the dear leader himself, but the entire the elite leadership. That's one thing. The reason why, even though just about any North Korean exile who knows about this stuff, who has, for example, worked for Bureau 39, will tell you that Bureau 39 is one of the most important political institutions and powerful institutions in the country. As I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, it has never been sanctioned by the UN. And when asked, the UN was a bit uncertain what to say about Bureau 39. Does it exist? Probably. What does it do? We really don't know. Had we known, we would have sanctioned them. I think we can go a bit further than this. We can go beyond the conclusion that Bureau 39 takes a cut of all the economic activities inside and outside of the country that go on with regard to North Korea, but that it is actually behind many of these economic activities outside of the country and is a big player in the export industry in North Korea, which I know will sound like an oxymoron to many people, but in fact, a significant part of North Korean economy, and I don't have any statistics yet, I hope, to back this statement up, but seems to be geared towards export and not to domestic consumption. Now, how can we even know this? A database, the Pyongyang census of 2007, was smuggled out of the country. I was given access to part of it, an anonymized part of it, so there's no names in it, no addresses, but the working places of all the inhabitants of Pyongyang were mentioned. And through that, you can gain a picture of the existence and the presence of Bureau 39 in Pyongyang. So what I'm going to tell you next is just about Pyongyang and not the rest of the country, because we don't have the data, at least I don't have the data for that. And if you look at the presence of Bureau 39 in Pyongyang, it's much bigger than I thought it would be. It falls right under the Central Committee of the party, so it has ties immediately connected to the leadership in North Korea, and it exists of 6 general bureaus that are part of Bureau 39 and administered by Bureau 39. And each of these general bureaus are kind of almost conglomerates in their own sense. And the reason why I use this word is because the biggest of these general bureaus have tens to even hundreds of entities tied to them. And those entities, basically they're enterprises, and they produce all kinds of things, mainly for export. Textile seems to be one of the most often produced products for export. There's even, and this is something that is quite a chilling thing to find out, the 4th Re-Educational Camp Garment Factory Bureau, which is a bureaucratic institution that manages the production of textiles in one of the political camps in North Korea. Let that sink in for a moment, what that means for the clothes you and I are wearing at this very moment. It's not just about textile. There are mines also falling under direct Bureau 39 control. So what I'm the things I'm going to list here, it's a long list, I'll not go into too much detail. These are not just North Korean economic activities, these are the specific activities that fall within the remit of Bureau 39. Banking is another one. In fact, the Taesong Bank, which has been sanctioned, is apparently under Bureau 39 control directly. There are watch factories, gum factories, cigarette factories, software development bureaus, all kinds of factories that are being managed by Bureau 39. There's a list here in the screen. First, seafood, shipping companies. I mean, the products have to go somewhere, right? Shoes, knitwear, tobacco, yogurt. My personal favorite, ostriches. An ostrich farm in Pyongyang is also managed by Bureau 39. Jewels, precious stones, and importantly, overseas workers. And this is something I've worked on overseas workers and how they're managed also in North Korea for a number of years. I didn't know that Bureau 39 was directly involved in their selection, training, and dispatch abroad. But they don't just take a cut, they are behind it at the central planning level. Another, and the last one on the list here is called home production. This is one of the probably remnants of a more socialist North Korea, in which mainly housewives come together and produce products, whatever is needed, at home, in small corporations, if you will, managed at the local level, the level of an apartment building, the level of a street in a village or a city, for example. This has often been seen as something that has managed to make North Koreans survive hard times. So it's also been seen as a place where they could withdraw from the state. This is something they would do themselves, grow vegetables, for example, raise rabbits and sell them on the black market. But again, Bureau 39 has many entities that only focus on home production. They're everywhere. I'll wrap up in a few minutes, but this is an important thing I think I should mention. It's just not just about economic activities. All the bigger institutions that fall under Bureau 39 have their own political guidance departments, their own political officers, which is a staple notion of North Korean life. But it is amazing to see exactly how much of these guidance departments are part of the economic enterprises of Bureau 39. They house representatives also of the Central Party. They even have branch offices of the OGD, which is probably the most powerful institution in North Korean social and political life. The institution that that looks at ideological and political purity. Now, to go to my conclusion. Now I've given you a lot of information here, but let me try and take a step back and reach some sort of conclusion. Well, my first conclusion would be is we need more research and I need more time to think about what we found. But one of the clear conclusions, I think, is that Bureau 39 has long been mentioned by North Korean exiles as a powerful institution, but it has been underestimated outside of the country. It has never appeared in the sanctions, for example, which doesn't make sense given its economic importance. It clearly has a finger in the export industry, and more than one finger in the pie, probably maybe even a complete hand. Importantly, also, it doesn't seem to be centrally organized. The bureaus, the general bureaus, so the subdivisions of Bureau 39, seem to compete with one another. They are active in the same branches. They produce the same kind of stuff, export the same kind of products. I'm not entirely sure how to explain this. Maybe it's reflective of the domestic political situation. I know North Korea comes across as a highly centralized state, but it's also prone to factional strife. So it seems to be a reflection of that. The state within a state is putting it to, it's an exaggeration, I think, probably, but it seems to reflect North Korean state structure. The last part of this conclusion is that we can map its economic activities now also from the inside through this database. It's not a very shadowy organization, in other words. It's it's a conglomerate. It consists of, we found over 2,000 entries in this database just connected to Bureau 39 in Pyongyang, between 2,000 and 3,000. And there's only one thing that separates, well, there are two things that ties them together. One, they are all part of the Bureau 39 organization in North Korea. And two, they all share the same goal, making money from economic activities aimed at the outside world. I think I'll stop here, and I'd welcome your questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Remco. Now, of course, you can ask your questions via the Q&A portal down the bottom of your screen. A question I have refers perhaps to your earlier research. Your earlier research highlighted the fact that there was essentially North Korean slavery taking place around the world, including in the European Union and notably in Poland. Now, as I understand it, that research that was done under the auspices of the LeidenAsiaCentre was concluded in, or at least the report was concluded in 2016.
Yeah,
it generated a lot of questions. There was a question, or questions, I believe, put to the European Parliament as a result of the research as well. In your mind, has the situation improved? Have things changed? Is there still this situation that's happening even in Europe, which we would usually understand as not condoning such practices?
Yeah, well, it seems to have changed slightly. But after the publication of the first report and even the second report, nothing really changed. Up until December 2019, most of the people we knew were working in Poland, for example, were still there. Visas were still being issued. I can answer one of the questions in the chat at the same time. The DRPK workers, generally speaking, across the world and certainly in the EU, arrived on residence permits, with residence permits and with working permits. So their stay in the EU was legal. What happened after? The exploitation, the long work hours, the dangerous conditions, the fact that they didn't get paid, were not allowed to become member of a union, didn't have any personal freedom, etc. That's illegal. Their presence and their labor in itself were not illegal. And basically what happened is that both the Dutch government and the Polish government denied that anything was wrong. So nothing really changed. To December 2019, that's when the UN sanctions finally kicked in for overseas workers who had to be repatriated. That to a certain extent happened, but we no longer have access to the sites we did research on. So we can't go there. I can't check it. Maybe if the statistics come out, issue residence permits and visas issued to North Koreans in Poland, for example, or in Germany or wherever, we can say a bit more. But for a long time, I was amazed by all the ruckus created by research and the complete lack of any kind of policy change afterwards. So nothing really changed.
Okay, so you've mentioned that Bureau 39 hasn't appeared on sanctions lists or the UN sanctions lists. Has anybody else sanctioned this organization, the US, for example?
It has sanctioned part of the organization, but not as Bureau 39 to my knowledge. I should be careful here because I don't have a verbal recall of all the UN sanctions or the US sanctions. I mean, it's a lot, and the Treasury Department is active in this regard. They have sanctioned companies that fall within Bureau 39's remit or under its umbrella, but not for being part of Bureau 39 to my knowledge. I may be wrong here, but to my knowledge, no. It's a shadowy organization that you see in sensationalist documentaries rather than in other places. But I think we've been able to show that this is one of the more important economic and political institutions, and thus political institutions in North Korea.
Well, then that itself raises an interesting question. We've got two questions on that topic, John and Holger Schultz in the Q&A are asking about your methods as a researcher. How do we even know, given that it's so shadowy, given that the UN doesn't even seem to want to acknowledge its existence, how do you know that it exists?
Well, I know we all knew it did exist, but we didn't know its exact function, which is why the UN, they never said it didn't exist, but it couldn't sanction it because it wasn't sure what they were doing. Two things. One is that I think I pay more attention, and I certainly put more faith in the testimonies of North Korean exiles, for which I get criticized a lot, I should honestly say. But to me, it's working with exile testimonies, not very different from working with written sources. Trained as a historian, I know better than to believe everything I read. You cross-check, right? And there's a whole critical apparatus you can use to check those testimonies. But they, with regard to Bureau 39, they say similar things. So it seemed to be very important. And the Pyongyang census database, which is a North Korean database made by the North Korean government, makes it very clear how much of the export production, the export industry in Pyongyang is actually part of Bureau 39. Now that's, to me, it would seem pretty incontrovertible evidence that Bureau 39 is very active, not just outside of the country, but also inside of the country. I don't see the point of recording that in a database for domestic use if it doesn't even exist.
Okay, is there anybody else working on this topic besides yourself? Are you part of a research group, an international research group? Zara Kimpton asks, are governments even showing interest?
No, I don't have funding now for anything. I haven't had funding since I was kicked out as the LeidenAsiaCentre director, which came after the publication of our last report, but which was not caused by the last report, I am assured, by LeidenAsiaCentre Supervisory Board. I'll leave that there. No, so I'm without funding, also because I've not been able, and this is maybe me, to convince governments that we should actually take a look at this. Some of the biggest Dutch companies in shipbuilding, for example, were shown to be indirectly making use of North Korean forced labor in Poland. They didn't know that they were doing it. They said they didn't deny that this had happened. So it's something we really should take a better look at. And my approach is not necessarily that from a security angle, but from a human rights perspective. If North Koreans want to go abroad, earn money for the family, fine. If that means that they're being exploited, all the money goes to the party, I'm less fine with that. So I'd be very happy. No, I should qualify that. I was going to say I'd be very happy with government funding. It depends on what government, obviously, and what type of funding, and depends on the strings attached. But I've had much. I should say we. I'm saying I all the time. It's a project group. It's not just me. We've had much interest from governments for our research, continuously so, but that wasn't accompanied by money. The only exception being Great Britain. They were really interested in funding, and for bureaucratic reasons that didn't work out, but they were actually willing to put to money where their mouth is.
Okay, so then we have a question. I mean, given that, okay, we don't necessarily that the Bureau 39 is a shadowy organization. From what you're telling me, it seems that we do know something about it. Why do you think that there have been no UN sanctions on Bureau 39?
Two things. I think first reason is the widespread distrust of North Korean exiles. Usually seen, well, this is emigre politics, right? They have an extra grind with the government in Pyongyang and so forth and so on, which may very well be the case in some cases, but that's one thing. And the other thing is we did lack, and we do lack, information. And I think the Pyongyang the census database does make a difference there. And it should, I think, Bureau 39 should make an appearance in more sanctions if that is necessary based on the fact that we now know more, empirically speaking. But we know more than we think we know, but we do not know enough. So it's understandable that Bureau 39 was seen as this shadowy organization. Instead of what it is, it's an economic and political widespread, or widespread is not the right word, quite complex organization.
Okay, well, let's delve a little bit more deeply into that. I mean, you have mentioned throughout the course of your presentation that you think that North Korea, and actually in the documentary as well, that North Korea is a capitalist economy. What's your justification for that? Is it some kind of, well, it obviously must be some kind of modified capitalism, but I mean, this would be a statement that many would find hard to swallow. Could you perhaps delve a little bit more into that to give us a more convincing?
I think that's one of the very few things me and my colleagues working on North Korea would agree upon. That after the famine of the 90s, in which well, estimates vary, but between 500,000 and 3 million people are said to have died, North Korean economy collapsed, and it only it was reconstructed to a certain extent, but by people taking charge of their own life and their own livelihood. The public distribution system, which is one of the hallmarks of a socialist state, certainly North Korea had collapsed and never really came back again. And to this day, it is the case that if you want to survive and you're not part of the elite, next to your official job, somebody in your family ought to have an unofficial job, for example, trading at the black market or growing vegetables and selling them or whatever is necessary, which makes it grassroots capitalism. Is that a word? I have no idea. In that sense, it's capitalism. But also if you look at the activities of the elite, so people in power, people who have the contacts and who have the authority to go abroad and to trade or to sell the products being produced in North Korea. That seems to be, we all focus on the missiles and on the nuclear weapons, and I can understand why. I think to a certain extent we should. We tend to underestimate North Korea as really as an entrepreneur country, decentralized. So all these, and I think I mentioned that at the end of my presentation, also Bureau 39, its left hand doesn't know what its right hand is doing probably. Which there are many people who come from a proper family background, revolutionary antecedents or whatever, and they go abroad or they send people abroad to trade, to earn money. And this is also a hallmark of being part of the elite, your ability to earn and to possess dollars. So yes, I would say it's a capitalist country. It's not in ideology, but in practice, definitely.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, we have a question along those lines from Ashley Stewart, who asks whether or not that fact of life, as you've outlined there, is actually recognized by the powers that be in North Korea. I mean, to what degree is the state still justified by an ideological adherence to communism, or has everybody given up on that in public discourse?
Well, it really depends on who you talk to. If you talk to North Korean exiles, for example, there are many reasons why they would flee the country. But many talk nostalgically about socialist life in the 70s and 80s and even early 90s. Well, obviously not about the famine. So on that level, it seems to really have existed, and it may still exist. Sharing is more common probably in North Korea than in many other countries on that level. But on the elite level, even the belief doesn't seem to exist anymore. Communism has been let go of a long time ago and replaced by our style socialism, which not in name but in practice has been replaced by what has, well, it's a very ugly term, but the monolithic leadership system. The overriding value in North Korea is loyalty to the great leader and to his revolutionary endeavors. So the rhetoric is still very much socialist. the reality is that I do think it's still it's capitalist, and it's, I'm not sure what to call it, monolithic leadership, cultist, probably. The importance of the Kim family is unparalleled. I'm not sure whether I'm answering the question there properly, but yeah.
Okay, very good. Now, previously you mentioned the competition within Bureau 39. Now, Heath McMichael, who is the president of our ACT branch, is asking whether or not this is a reflection of the intra-regime competition. Is the competition or the friction within Bureau 39, is that just typical bureaucratic politics, do you think, or is it the sign of something bigger going on?
I think both. I should be careful because I'm not an expert on domestic North Korean politics, but the hypothesis that the fact that Bureau 39 branches really seem to compete with one another is indicative of political strife. Yes, and there's also, of course, bureaucratic strife that you'll find in any kind of bureaucracy. And if North Korea is anything, it certainly is a bureaucracy also. And I also think it's reflective of the broader political situation in North Korea, and certainly in its capital. But as I should be cautious in my explanation here, because again, I'm not an expert on internal domestic North Korean politics. But the hypothesis seems to be worth looking into. Let's put it like that.
So we do have questions related to hacking from Andrew Phillips in the documentary, and I think you mentioned it briefly in your presentation. There's there's obviously a very large-scale hacking operation in North Korea. Does that relate to Bureau 39, and how is North Korea positioned relative to other countries in terms of potential for cyber attacks?
First question, is that connected to Bureau 39? Part of it certainly is. Not everything as far as I can see. And if it's about cyber warfare, it's probably not connected to Bureau 39. And North Korea, and again, I'm basically telling you now what I've learned from experts on cyber warfare, which I am not, is that North Korea seems to be very well positioned in terms of cyber warfare. Also because it started training, and this is something I did look into, it started training children in the late 80s already for what was then called electronic warfare. It's probably Kim Jong-il or people around him realized at a fairly early stage that conventional warfare would not be North Korea's savior, because it would not be able to maintain the upkeep of the kind of really large conventional army North Korea has. So it needed to find different ways, asymmetrical warfare, in order to defend itself and to go on the offense if needed. Cyber warfare certainly seems to be part of it, and it is big part of North Korea defensive and offensive capabilities. That's probably where I should leave it before I say things that are just patently not true as a non-expert on cyber warfare.
All right. A couple of other questions. There are questions here about not so much Bureau 39, but attempts to trade in nuclear technology. I mean, yeah. I assume that this is something that that Bureau 39 doesn't do, although you might put me right there. Is there any involvement? And in general, I mean, what is the current status of North Korea's clandestine nuclear trade?
Well, I don't know. That's the honest answer there. And whether Bureau 39 is involved in these kind of deals, it could very well be. I mean, if certain parts for the nuclear weapons development program are needed, you go through the routes that have already, the channels that have already been established. If that's a Bureau 39 channel, you go through that channel. And I do know the networks that extended all the way to the Netherlands. Apparently, we not only helped the North Koreans and Pakistan go nuclear by by basically allowing the technology behind nuclear centrifuges being exported to Pakistan and then to North Korea. But we've also been very helpful in ordering parts for nuclear facilities that you cannot easily order if you're the North Korean government. Was that Bureau 39? I don't know, to be honest. That takes a lot more of really the nitty-gritty kind of research that I would love to do, but I do not have the funding for it. Lots of people, lots of footwork, legwork that you'll have to do. And the present state of its weapons program, I don't know. I'm willing to take Chairman Kim at his word that they don't need to do any more testing because basically they're finished. It works. Again, I'm not an expert on this, so I should be careful. It seems that they have a viable nuclear weapons program. That's all I can confidently say about that, I think.
Okay, a little more on the actual workers themselves, perhaps, as you've mentioned that you are interested in this from a human rights perspective. And I know that some of the research, I don't know if it was your research, but I know that at least some of the research involved interviews with the workers in Poland and other places, but also, of course, interviews with North Korean exiles. What's their motivation here? Why are these? I mean, obviously, they're living in a state where they don't have much choice. But once they get to foreign countries, why don't we see them, for example, deserting North Korea?
Yeah, well, good question. And to the extent that we've been able to determine the exact percentage of North Koreans abroad who then leave the employ of the state, it's infinitesimally small. There are hardly any people who do so. And if you assume that our estimations of 150,000 to 200,000 workers abroad are correct, it's surprising how few people actually escape. There are a few things I should say here. I think one is that working abroad started as a kind of punishment for party and system unfriendly elements in the 60s, who were then sent to Siberia to go to logging camps. But it evolved into something which was actually a positive thing, because you could earn money and you could take things home that weren't widely available in North Korea then. So by the 90s, people wanted to go abroad and work abroad into the 2000s. By now, the perception has changed because some people don't return, or they return in coffins, and they don't return with much money. But their motivation is very simple. People expect to live a freer life and certainly to work hard, but to make money and to take a fair amount of that money home to their family. This often doesn't happen, but it did happen in the past. And why don't they, if it's really that horrible, if their lives are so difficult, if they're not even allowed to communicate with their families back home? They do through people they know, but often they can't. Why don't they just flee? Well, the thing is, especially if you are recruited to go abroad and live in a country that's seen as a good country to live, for example, the EU, the recruitment process includes a review of your personal file. It includes interviews or letters of authorization by your Iminbanjang, which is the I can't think of the English word now, the blockhead, who is the head of the area you live in, who is responsible for your conduct and behavior at home, also your ideological purity, etc. Your employer. You have to bribe people before you get selected, and they prefer people who have a family, who leave behind a partner and 2 children, preferably. And if you go to Poland, for example, where the risk of defection would be higher than in, say, for example, the Middle East or Africa, they even interview your wife to make sure that you have a happy enough marriage to suppose that you wouldn't want to flee and leave your family behind even if it would negatively affect them. So the reason why people do not easily flee, defect, is because their family is left behind. And also they don't really have a place to go to. South Korea is not very hospitable to North Koreans, and North Koreans know that.
Okay, great. So I guess we'll end on the question of what do we do now? I mean, if you had a magic wand and you could come up with some sort of solution for this problem, a realistic one, not a magic solution. I mean, what would you advocate for?
I don't know. I don't see any realistically viable solutions at the moment. This is a system that, abhorrent as I may find it personally, it works in the sense that it manages to maintain itself, and it may keep on doing so. Is there a way to put an end to it? Is that even a legitimate wish as an academic to voice that? Well, I'm going to do it anyway, whether it's legitimate or not. I would like to see a different kind of government, different kind of regime system in North Korea, one that takes more, that considers its people more, but it's up to North Koreans themselves to make that change. I don't think I would not advocate for some kind of military intervention. Sanctions are symbolically important, but do they work? Well, to a certain extent they do. North Korea actually, one of the reasons why the liaison office was disappeared from the earth, was bombed really, is because the North Korean elite knows it needs to start trading again. It needs its economic activities. It needs to get rid of the sanctions, and the sanctions in combination with Corona crippling the world economy really has been hurtful for North Korea. But what I would, if I would have to advocate for something, I would advocate for for engagement, not with the regime, because look where that got us, Singapore and Hanoi, may I remind you, but with North Korean people. Invest in North Koreans themselves when they when they visit China and buy stuff for their often illegal but still condoned trading practices. Give them microcredits. Make sure that there is a place where they have more, well, ownership, if you will, of their own life, where the party and the system find it just a bit more difficult to reach them and to influence them. Make those spaces as big as possible, and then maybe one day North Koreans themselves, because it's up to them, it's their country, it's not mine, will decide that yes, we would like to see differences, a different government here. We'd like to make changes. I think realistically, that's the only way to go. Any other kind of approach, whether it's full out engagement, which will just basically institutionalize, legitimize modern slavery. And I know many of my colleagues don't agree with me, but what can I say? They're wrong. Or the other way, military intervention, the John Bolton approach, will just land us in a war, the consequences of which we cannot really fathom. So engagement with the ordinary North Koreans, leave out the government, leave out the party, leave out the system. And that would be my most realistic approach, I think.
Okay, great. And that's almost all the time we've got left. I'd just like to say that we do have a full schedule of events coming up. So stick around with us and we will let you know what they are. In the meantime, though, I want to say thanks very much to Remco for joining us today and for what was a fascinating talk. Hope to see you down here at some stage.
Yeah, I'd love to come and visit.
Great. See you later.
Bye.